It was a day like any other when I returned home after an overnight trip, excited to jump into my own bed and catch up on some much-needed rest. However, the moment I walked into my bedroom, I was met with a sight that sent shivers down my spine and a mix of anger and disbelief coursing through me. My bed, my sanctuary, was stained and sticky, tainted with a memory I'd rather forget. My ex-boyfriend had committed the ultimate act of betrayal by cheating on me right in my own bed, and to make matters worse, he hadn't even bothered to change the sheets. The mixture of anger and disgust welled up inside me, but I decided that if he was careless enough to leave his phone unlocked and charging, perhaps he deserved some payback. With a sense of determination, I seized his unlocked phone and immediately went through his entire contacts list. My mission was simple: to find out who the other person involved in this sordid affair was. This list included not only his work colleagues and boss but also relatives. I boldly dialed each number, one by one, and inquired if they were the one who had been sharing my bed. I described the stained sheets in all their repulsiveness, making sure they knew exactly what they were being accused of. But my revenge didn't stop there. As I gathered his belongings and prepared to return them, I stumbled upon documents that revealed his web of deceit. To my shock, he had falsely informed his workplace that his mother had passed away, a heart-wrenching lie to gain a couple of weeks off. His colleagues and boss had even gone as far as to send condolences cards and gifts. My response was swift and relentless. I sent the condolences card and heartfelt notes to his parents, their "sorry your mom died" message prominently displayed on top. His poor mother received the most unfortunate shock of all. I wasn't finished yet. I couldn't ignore the lies he'd spun at his workplace, so I penned a letter to his boss. In it, I revealed the truth about his living and breathing mother, offering her address and phone number for verification. There was no way he could escape the consequences of his actions. I went further by contacting the Driver and Vehicle Licensing Agency, DVLA, to provide them with his new contact details. I also shared the location of his abandoned, untaxed, uninsured, and MOT-less car that was left on a public road. Justice needed to be served. But the grand finale of my revenge plan was reserved for his financial misdeeds. I sent detailed information about the credit cards he had secretly taken out, violating the rules of his debt management plan. This breach could lead to a complete removal of the substantial debt discount and require him to pay off the entire sum. I also reached out to the new credit card companies, informing them of his hidden debt management plan. To ensure they could track him down, I included his changed address and phone number. When I handed him his belongings, I accidentally misplaced book one of a complete limited edition Terry Pratchett collection, one of his most prized possessions. I watched as his frustration grew, knowing it was just a taste of the pain he'd caused me. In one final, devilish stroke of revenge, I accidentally wiped all his game saves on his beloved PS3 and Xbox 360. His virtual achievements vanished, mirroring the way he had vanished from my life. It may have been an act of retribution, but it was the closure I needed to move forward, leaving behind a man who had betrayed my trust in the most personal way possible. A few years ago, my sister requested my help with a quick store run, and I had to use her car since our brother had borrowed mine. Little did we know, this mundane trip would soon turn into a satisfying act of revenge. Upon reaching the store, we found ourselves in a situation familiar to many, the search for a parking spot. As luck would have it, we almost simultaneously arrived at an open space, right alongside another woman who seemed to have quite a different definition of parking lot etiquette. As we were about to park, she carelessly flung her car door open, and it made a harsh impact with my sister's passenger door. I shot her a bewildered and disapproving look, but she didn't seem the least bit concerned. Without even a hint of acknowledgement, she simply walked away. Now, here's where things got interesting. Instead of immediately confronting her or venting our frustration, I decided to wait a couple of moments. We watched her go about her business, thinking she could get away with this reckless behavior. But then, it was payback time. With my sister's enthusiastic permission, I unleashed my inner fury. I flung open her car door with a vengeance, not once, but several times. The impact was forceful enough to chip the paint, and the uproarious noise triggered her car alarm. It was a symphony of revenge, punctuated by the relentless wailing of the alarm. With our petty act of retaliation complete, we calmly relocated to a different parking spot. It was a tad less convenient, but the satisfaction of teaching the inconsiderate lady a lesson made it all worthwhile. Take that, parking lot villain. A few years back, I worked at my university in an administrative position, and my story centers on a juicy bit of workplace drama involving myself, my boss L, and a not-so-friendly colleague named B. I genuinely enjoyed my job, and L, my boss, was pretty happy with my performance. But there was a twist in the tale. I was on a temporary contract, and when it was time for renewal, B, who was a colleague with a permanent position, decided to play dirty. B marched over to the dean and effectively said, "Hey, I can handle all the tasks this temporary worker is doing within my existing duties. No need to renew their contract." And, yeah, she straight up told me that she'd pulled this stunt, all because she wanted to work closely with L, who wasn't exactly thrilled about it. You can imagine how frustrating this was for L and me. We'd initiated various projects, and while we shared the workload, I had poured my heart and soul into creating most of the content. This was because L had other responsibilities, and I had been the one communicating with the many people we'd enlisted to help. But, when B assumed control, she sent out emails taking credit for all the projects that L and I had worked on together. B made it seem like it was all her own work with just a little input from L. L apologized to me for this and said it was inappropriate. And, honestly, it was. However, here's where things take a little twist. I still had access to all the project materials and knew that I was the brain behind 80% of it. So, what did I do? I decided to lock everything down. When B asked about the materials, I simply told her that, as I no longer worked at the university, I didn't have access to confidential materials. If nobody but me could get to it, that was BA's problem to deal with. The materials were an essential collection of promo pieces, email templates, and spreadsheets related to annual leave, and I had complete control over them. As a result, B, with her newly acquired responsibilities, accidentally signed up lecturers for events they couldn't attend. She had to rebuild my content from scratch, sending out emails with mistakes like wrong dates, incorrect content, and so on. She couldn't get into the social media platforms I had set up, access the shared inbox I managed, or organize events accurately. My inbox started filling up with emails from bewildered departments and people who weren't aware that B had taken over my role. They were asking why they'd been scheduled for talks on days when they'd be on another continent, and I simply told them that B was handling things now. Everything was in perfect order when I left, so whatever had gone wrong, it was BA's responsibility to fix it. L, my boss, vented her frustration to me on numerous occasions, and she agreed that I was entirely reasonable in my actions. On the other hand, B began to loathe me, but honestly, that was no longer my problem. The other day, I was cruising down the road, minding my own business when I decided to change lanes to pass a slower driver. As I glanced in my rearview mirror, I noticed the car behind me was also attempting a lane change. No big deal, right? I went ahead and executed my lane change, but that's when things took an unexpected turn. The car behind me sped into the left lane, then abruptly swerved back into my lane, nearly colliding with my vehicle. It was obvious that the driver wanted to make a point about me getting in their way. Now, this person was clearly in a hurry, but the traffic was heavy, and I was left fuming. I made a somewhat impulsive decision to follow them, though I kept my distance and didn't engage in any reckless driving to avoid any confrontations. In the end, they managed to escape my pursuit, but I had some clues to work with. The car they were driving was a bit beat up, but there were brand new tags displayed in the window. That led me to believe they were likely on the younger side. They were also headed in the direction of a local community college, and it was around 5 minutes before the start of the hour. My guess? They were late for a class. I decided to pull into the college's parking lot about 4 or 5 minutes later, and remarkably, I found their car. My initial thoughts involved some rather destructive plans, like keying their car or slashing their tires. But then I remembered the words of wisdom from the /petty revenge subreddit, and I knew I had to keep things non-destructive. So, I decided to write them a note instead. It read, "You shouldn't drive so aggressively. Some people can become quite unhinged. Now that I know your class schedule, I'll be watching." I sincerely hope that my note has kept this person nervously checking their surroundings for the past couple of weeks. In fact, I'm even contemplating leaving another note soon to extend my unconventional revenge.
It had been nearly a year since I had joined the organization, and for the most part, things were going well. My job was satisfying, and my boss, L, seemed content with my performance. However, there was one persistent thorn in my side, a coworker named Karen. She had an uncanny knack for complicating even the simplest of tasks and had a tendency to overstep her boundaries, especially when it came to marketing decisions. Karen wasn't even part of the marketing team, and that made her constant interference even more baffling. The main issue was her habit of using her persuasive skills to overturn marketing decisions that had already been approved, all to suit her personal preferences. I couldn't bring myself to hate Karen. Instead, I tried to understand her, empathizing with the struggles she'd faced in previous jobs. In her past roles, she had been a one-woman army, allowed extensive creative freedom without the need to adhere to any professional branding. But times were changing for the organization, and with its expansion, a more cohesive and professional image was necessary. This created a natural conflict between my efforts to streamline the branding and marketing strategies and Karen's inclination to indulge her creative instincts. I had to ensure that we adhered to branding guidelines, use approved typography, and follow strict color schemes to appeal to a broader audience effectively. But every now and then, I found myself frustrated, cursing at my computer screen as Karen took it upon herself to exercise her creative flair, often with Canva or Photoshop. Over time, my boss and I began implementing processes to deter Karen from meddling in marketing decisions. These processes had been working fairly well, preventing Karen from interfering in the projects I had carefully curated to elevate the organization's image. However, this precarious peace was soon disrupted. The incident that rattled the balance occurred during a project I had been overseeing. We were in the midst of a massive radio show campaign. Having already spent a significant amount on advertising, the project's success was critical. Everything had been going according to plan until Karen decided to express her disapproval of a particular aspect of the campaign. It was a decision that almost brought the entire project to a grinding halt. Karen's power play nearly cost us the culmination of weeks of hard work and considerable investment. The radio show project was teetering on the brink, adding immense stress to L, my boss, who now viewed Karen as her arch nemesis. Our entire team had eagerly anticipated the radio campaign, envisioning their potential fame. Yet Karen's objection had disrupted the project timeline, pushing us back by a frustrating 2 months. Although I had embraced remote work, part of my job required coordinating with colleagues, sometimes through video calls. But after the disastrous meeting where Karen had voiced her dissatisfaction, I had sworn off video calls. She had become animated and confrontational, and her behavior was anything but professional. My boss, L, and Karen's boss had shared their dismay, and it was a scene I never wished to relive. I had decided to maintain a professional distance from Karen, with communication limited to written channels like Microsoft Teams or the newly implemented request system. The automated request system had been a godsend, keeping all requests organized, allowing L and me to manage tasks efficiently. It had been an excellent solution for most of the team, ensuring a seamless workflow. However, this newfound tranquility would soon be disrupted, as fate had other plans for us. One day, I mentioned in a group chat that we were working on a new landing page for an upcoming PR campaign. The page was linked to research, and I was excited about its potential. I thought that sharing this news with Karen and her team was a benign gesture, but I had underestimated her tenacity. In typical fashion, Karen responded to my message with resistance. It was the first step in her tried-and-true method of undermining my projects. She started her usual tirade, questioning the decisions and creating an air of dissent. But this time, something was different. Karen's boss, the head of her department, stepped in to curb her insubordination. It was a moment of unexpected vindication for me. For the first time, I had not one but two colleagues who not only supported my marketing decisions but also reprimanded Karen for her behavior. It was a significant departure from the usual pattern, and I couldn't help but relish the moment. But, of course, the story doesn't end there. In a classic Karen twist, the peaceful moment took a dramatic turn. Later, she sent me a message claiming that she had completed her sample pack for a campaign. Given the previous history, I anticipated it was a little late and was ready to check it out. But my screen, ever the receptacle for my unspoken frustrations, couldn't have prepared me for what I saw. There, on the screen, was an unauthorized logo. Karen had taken the liberty of creating a new brand, concocted by mashing together elements from various existing ones. It was a blatant violation of the branding guidelines that clearly prohibited such an action. In our organization, logo usage was tightly regulated, with set guidelines for size, location, font, and color, all of which were broken by Karen's creativity, or lack thereof. I wanted to address this matter diplomatically. I sent her a message, politely inquiring about the origin of the logo and mentioning the need for approval from L, our boss. I expected her to acknowledge her mistake and offer to rectify it, thus preventing further escalation. However, I should have known that Karen's pride would get the better of her. Her response was far from what I had anticipated. Instead of showing remorse, she brushed it off, claiming that she hadn't thought it was a significant issue. The kicker? She had already emailed L, my boss, about the situation, bypassing the approved approval system. The situation had escalated beyond what I had imagined, with not only myself and Karen's boss copied into the email but also my boss. The stage was set for what would undoubtedly be a challenging return to work for L, fresh off her vacation. She would be greeted by a chaotic inbox, with countless emails to sift through, including one from Karen, showcasing her blatant disregard for protocol and breaking of the rules. The situation was poised for a volatile storm of emotions, as my normally polite boss grappled with the turmoil that awaited her. As I reflected on the situation, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of empathy for Karen's impending plight and a sense of hope that this episode might finally teach her the importance of adhering to workplace guidelines. Whether it could be considered petty revenge or merely the unintentional consequences of breaking the rules, it was clear that tomorrow would bring about a series of dramatic revelations, and I could only wonder how the narrative would unfold.